Jonita, welcome to Stand, Speak, Shine.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this communication and conversation with you. It's been a couple of years since we spoke, and I'm so excited to catch up on all the things that's been happening for us.
I know you and we had an interview. I want to say it was 2 years ago. I'll have to go back in the show notes or into the website and find out when that was. But you and I just connected and we continue to stay in touch. And I felt a real resonance with what you were teaching about honoring the feminine, the somatics really of going into the deep feminine embodiment. And so we'll touch on that today in our interview. But I know what one synchronicity that was so interesting is that you and I both had jasmine oil sitting next to our desks here as we commenced this interview unknowingly. So that is the oil of beautiful, deep feminine. You could even call it even a dark feminine. It's those flowers are picked at night. As you know, they're sourced in India where you're from. And so it's just kind of interesting that we were both just drawn to use that essential oil before we began talking. But I would really love for you to give a background on your lineage. And I know you're originally from India, born, in India, you moved to England, and then you're now back in India for a time, but just your Indian feminine mysticism and how you came into that.
So when I moved to the UK in my early 20s, I came across this moment in my life, which was, I'd like to say, like the dark night of the ego, maybe not the soul, but the ego. I've been
the ego. I love that.
Yeah, I've been pondering about it. That does soul really have a dark night, or is it our ego? So I'm rephrasing those experiences and reflecting a lot. When I got an opportunity to move to England in my early 20s, I thought that was freedom for an Indian girl going into the Western world, and I could express myself. So I was really happy, but also confused at the same time, because I could not understand the dynamics of outward expression of beauty that I noticed in women there. And it was all good. I enjoyed it. There's nothing that I want to complain about. My personal experience was that I became surrounded with women who strived really hard to look good, to be accepted in social circles and in at work, in front of colleagues and all of that. So it was a lot of efforting on the outside, and which I started doing as well, which I enjoyed to an extent, which I did not have the opportunity in India, working in an IT field in India among men. I was acting like a tomboy to keep myself, safe and keep my introverted self protected and guarded. And London felt like a whole new world. And there was this point in 6 months into my time there, was this point where I felt quite confused, lost, and this feeling was kind of exaggerated by the death of my father in India. So I went into a deep depression, and my skin was filled with condition called psoriasis. And all of this was happening at the same time, and I did not feel beautiful, and I was tired of looking beautiful, and I was really sad and upset. I thought that being in India and striving so hard to become an independent woman and making my way, finding my freedom in the Western world, I had made it. But I was so lost and angry with God. And that was the moment where through series of synchronicities, I was guided to a teacher who became my mentor for the next few years. And she told me that I'm going to show you your essence. And this essence work really touched me, because I was confused as who I am as a woman. In the East, it didn't match what I felt like. In the West, it didn't match or feel like who I was. So and I was really angry. She gave me a book by the Dalai Lama, and it said that the loss of dear one can be one of your greatest gifts in life. And that made me really angry, because I did not want gift. I wanted my father back, who was, my cheerleader and greatest supporter. So I was really angry at God, and I grew up in a Christian family. So being in India, growing up among this traditional lineage and all the Hindu goddesses, I was somehow blocked because of my religious upbringing, Christian religious upbringing. I was blocked to all of that information. For me, it always existed, but I was very resistant. That was my conditioning at that time. And this teacher started teaching me practices from what she had learned through years and years of studying Indian spiritualism. And I was wondering, and it was really interesting, because through her, I met a group of women who were practicing similar things, and teachers, and they were teaching me things that I knew that existed back in my country, and I was so resistant to. And I was, I thought of that as not for me, because I'm a Christian girl, and this is not for me, and all of that. And so it really made me think and question my beliefs into why I was, removed from my original lineage, or why I was removed from there and taken away to a different land, so that I can look back and find resonance to something that was already there, that already was always present. So that was the beginning of my journey into coming back to my lineage.
So interesting. I've been hearing from a lot of women who have different traditions and ethnicities, and you could call also like faith traditions and direct lineages and teachings, and just how they came into a certain point in their life where they wanted to be more universal and more allowing of other ways of looking at things. I include myself in that too. When you are in a heavily Christian, and I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way towards Christianity, but a lot of times people can get so locked in to one way of looking at things that they forget that this is a vast universe with, a whole bunch of different traditions, even on this earth, that link back to some beautiful, I guess you could say goddess worship, or more of that feminine, matriarchal, or divine feminine type of cosmology that was completely extracted from a lot of these. You could call Christianity a newer religion than Hinduism, for sure.
Yeah.
In a sense that almost colonizing some of these traditions that have existed, that revered the goddess, that are mythology a lot of times, but they hold rich meaning, and archetypally they connect us back to who we are, especially as women.
Yeah, archetype, that's the word. So strong. All of us women from different parts of the world, different lineages, can feel into so many different archetypes from all the other lineages, and that's what connects us. I think that's why we hold memories of various lineages in this lifetime, and we feel drawn and connected to goddesses from India, from Egypt, from South America, like Africa. We feel her inside of us, and I think that through life's various turns, we are brought to the different goddesses that are relevant for our own growth at the point in life. So that was my journey in particular as well.
That's amazing. So, and I really appreciate how you phrased it as the dark night of the ego. Even though I think the soul is involved in a sense of taking us through that. And it becomes like an existential crisis a lot of times. Yeah. And I'm like laughing, but I kind of laugh about it now, but it wasn't really fun when I was doing that work, and I'm still in it. Of course, you never really diminish your ego completely, and finding, but a lot of it had to do with, what do I know in my body versus what has been handed to me as what I need to believe or accept. So with that in mind, let's move into kind of what you and I were talking about before we started recording, which I think was a really rich central focus of what it means to be heart-led, and how as women we can actually, we can even say heart-centered, but just how do you make that your life focus, that everything sort of revolves around? I think you and I agree that that's where it's at, but not a lot of people are talking about what it means to really embrace that. And how that you were talking about essence work and how that was sort of your point of awakening, like just the phrase of what is your essence? And I think a lot of that has to do with where the heart is leading us. So that's just a long way of prefacing this question of what it means to be heart-centered or heart-led for you.
So when working with the heart, what I came to the understanding is that we do not totally claim the innate nature of our hearts. We have felt so much of pain, and we hold that tenderness, and there is a lot of hurt and pain that we can feel in our hearts as women, due to various kinds of experiences, and we see heart as this tender thing that that we need to hold and guard and even make a wall around. And interestingly, doing the dark feminine work was about opening your heart and let it bleed. Let it bleed to the point where you begin to trust the true nature of your heart. The heart is called anahata, which is the Sanskrit word for the heart chakra, anahata chakra. And anahata means something that can never be destroyed, can never be beaten, or can never be unstuck, can never be stuck. It's unstuck. So that's the true nature of our heart. And that's what we have forgotten, because we got so caught up in the pain, in holding the pain, and we hold the pain through our minds, not really through our heart. And we walk guarded. We're all scared to really trust that our hearts can feel more pain, and it has the ability to feel the pain. So working with the dark feminine, and as I said, like letting my heart bleed open and really looking into scenarios that were hurting me, and really going into the worst case scenarios, and sitting there with my heart open and letting my heart do its thing. And it cannot be put into words. It's so interesting because you and I can feel it, and the women listening can feel it, because the workings of the heart, when you open your heart, there are no words to put in there, but you feel this power that is in your heart. And you can be a mess, you can be feeling sad or low, but you can in the same time trust the power of our hearts. And for me, it became a journey to understand the worthiness of my heart itself. Like my heart is capable, we have been conditioned to see our heart as a weak thing, heartbroken. We use these phrases so commonly. So for me to, and worthiness comes from this root word to worship. So when I started worshiping my heart in rituals where I could call in my pain, and I can really hold my bells of love, as they call in Taoist, to your breasts. When I could really hold my breast, my heart, and just feel the pain, you reach a point where there is no more pain. There is just absolute nothingness. And we are afraid to go there.
Let's talk about that a minute, because I know last time you and I talked, you sort of instructed our listeners on what the dark feminine is. And even that word dark, that what we've associated with that, meaning evil or bad or wrong. And what I hear you say is that, and I completely agree that there's this piece of it that's not able to be broken. It's indestructible, and it's centered in the heart. I didn't know that that's what anahata meant. So thank you for that. But with the dark feminine and with, it's almost like when we say nothingness, we don't mean meaningless or nothing in the sense of worthless. The no thing or the nothing or the dark cosmic womb is where all life originates, all ideas, all innovations, all inspirations. So let's just work there for a minute and maybe bring people into like, why is that so scary? Why do we feel this really dread? I would even call it terror or dread around going into nothing. And how do you define that?
Yeah. In the void, there is this emptiness, and this emptiness is the fertile ground. And often we are just so conditioned to fill up all those empty spaces in our lives. We don't even know how. So first of all, I didn't know how to even reach that space, let alone what it means or how to get there. So we are so conditioned to be busy and really numbing our feelings that we do not like this emptiness. I remember working with a couple of women who had issues just going to bed without listening to or watching to the scrolling through their phones, and because they could hear their thoughts then if they did not
they
do
have to be
anything.
alone with what was happening in the mind and what was going on for them internally, and it's just
yeah. And this is also the workings of the dark feminine. When you are in the space of nothingness or total silence or absolute doing nothing, non-action, and you listen, she begins to speak. She begins to speak things that you're not interested to listen, that you don't want to listen, that you know that you should be listening, but you're ignoring. Yeah. And you resist, we resist that, and then we go about numbing that. So there's this whole loop that keeps going on and on and on. So that's how I actually feel that then we are resistant to the nothingness, and we are afraid to feel the pain, because pain has been so energized, and it's so beautiful that our heart has the ability to hold pain and pleasure at the same time. And this has been my practice, to really hold my heart and call in my pain, and go into breathing and really holding until I find that sweet spot. And there is always a sweet spot. We're just not patient enough.
Yeah, it's something I've been writing and reflecting on quite a bit, is the cave, the metaphor of the cave, and going into, you have your own inner light, you have a flashlight, if you will. And usually those quote unquote dark places, I think there's a quote, even maybe it's Joseph Campbell or Rumi, but the cave you fear, it is Joseph Campbell, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So the gold and the real richness and the truth of who you are, it requires you go into the unknown. This is the heroine's journey, or the hero's journey. Is part of it is, and we're like in religion and in academia and even just general cultural social programming, we're taught to avoid the cave. Like, here is the truth for all of you. Look no further. And this is inner work, these caves. This is deep plunging of an interior excavation or interior exploration. So when you had that realization, because I know this is your work, with women and the dark feminine and what that represents, when you really get in there, there's actually no fear. Like, the fear response is the journey to the cave. But when you're actually turning the flashlight on, which is all about the heart, right? When you actually turn that light on inside and find that's when you find that treasure. So I love that metaphor. And I love the idea of facilitating women through these interior caves. And I know you do too. That's we just do it differently. We're doing shadow work, but we're doing it differently. You're doing it through your lineage. I'm doing it through mine. So how do you midwife or guide a woman into that cave, and how does she find the flashlight so that she has her bearings about her?
There has to be a willingness to look into the parts of ourselves that we are denying. And so this is foundational. So I cannot guide anyone or any woman specifically if they are not willing to look into the parts that they have denied themselves of. And parts can be emotions specifically, desires, longings, pain. So anything that is holding our hearts heavy, and looking into that first, what is burdening us, that what are we denying, because this is what the dark feminine reminds us to look into, and she keeps speaking, whispering all those things. And once we are ready and willing, then it becomes a journey to also accept the fear, because I have for many, many years tried to get rid of my fears, fear of public speaking, fear of this, fear of that, fear. There's always the fear. Fear always exists, and it comes back with new faces. Once this fear is clear, something else comes up. So I realized that I was spending a lot of energy trying to heal my fears, or fix my fears, or get rid of my fears. And so it became really important for me to not spend a lot of energy there, but really invoke the ability that fear and desire can exist at the same time. And how will that look like? How will that look like? And how can I walk in duality? And this is the part of Tantra. How can I walk in duality? Is that even possible? And yes, it is possible, but it requires us to become really vigilant of our own thoughts, of our own perspectives of life. And it requires, for me, it looked like I started talking to myself out loud, and I looked like a mad person most of the times, like just talking to my fear, talking to my desire. It's just constant reminders, giving ourselves constant reminders that if there is fear, there is a desire. If there is a desire, there is a fear. It's just part of cycle. And we've got to learn, as women, we've got to learn to hold a bigger vibe rather than a high vibe, because high vibe goes, but the big vibe is our capacity, gives us the capacity to really lead ourselves.
Yes, that's so beautiful. I love everything you're saying, and it's so resonant and rich for me, because I've walked this path of the unknown, especially the last 4 years, into what I left behind, what I took out of the backpack, if you will. I thought I needed, but it was ever apparent that everything I needed wasn't in a backpack or anything exterior. It was just all inside of me. And like you said, just making friends with that fear and accepting that the fear response is part of being human, and that the fear response can actually take me deeper into what I really believe. So when I feel a lot of fear, it's like, what is this about? I don't try to analyze it necessarily. Like you said, I just try to sit with it. I used to psychoanalyze it. I used to be like, where did this start? And what's this about? But now,
what can I do?
but now I'm like, wow, this is big. This is a big response inside of me. This is taking up a lot of internal energy. And then I just try to send love to it, because, that's the catalyzer. That's what puts us back into the heart space. So you mentioned being heart-led and normalizing the human fear response and neutralizing it. Duality. This is one thing that I'm really like, as I look at my astrological chart, it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm meant to hold tension in this life. I'm meant to hold this tension, and all of my desires and all of the things and the longings of my heart have a tension point, because it requires that I balance that duality. And you're nodding, and I know you know this. What we mean by duality, listeners, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is just everything that holds light has a shadow side to it. And that sometimes you have to, in fact, I would say almost all of your gifts, you have to be in the shadow aspect of that gift, literally be in it, sit in it, go in the cave, live it, in order to unlock the gift that is on the other side of that. So I study a lot of like Gene Keys and how Richard read, and he talks about this a lot. So you mentioned heart-led leadership. And this is something that's come into your space even since you and I last talked. This is really you've been up for you, and you've been working it into what you do with women and feeling into what that means for you personally. You and I are both introverts. People don't really know because we're out there teaching and doing all these things in groups and things. And I have, it's like, first of all, heart-led leadership and introversion can be tension.
Yeah.
So let's start there for you. What does that evoke in you when I share that part of introversion?
It feels good to just accept it, because I had been resisting for most of my adulthood, trying to prove myself. And it requires you to come out and be like the others, or be visible. It requires, and even in the personal development realm, in leadership, they teach how to be visible, and you should have these leadership traits. And I started trying all of that, when I was learning public speaking and being on stage and networking for my business, because I really wanted to put this business to work. It became so exhausting to me, and I really wanted to go back to my corporate job of being an IT engineer, because what was the point, right? What was the point if I shifted from one life to the other, but doing the same thing in different ways? So I had to really understand that my work and my expression was not about Jonita's expression and Jonita's visibility, but there was this greater force inside of me, which was the message. So for me, when I started really accepting the fact that I am just the messenger, it took off a lot of weight out of my, acting to be a leader in a certain way. And I started building a relationship with the consciousness of the message itself. What was the message telling me? How can I lead? How can I not just birth you, but give life to you? So I spent hours journaling as if I am the message, and this consciousness has a message for Jonita. So I did like hours, and I do it even now. Like when I have a project coming, like really bubbling inside of me, I go for a few days into my cave and just writing as the consciousness. And it's not about the content or the idea of it, but how would the consciousness want Jonita to lead or perform, or is there any support available? And there is this conversation that I go into, which really freed me, and also freed my ego to be perfect, to be refined. And every time I made mistake, I wasn't being that harsh to me anymore, because I realized that I'm a messenger. I can course correct. It's not about me. So that was a huge part in me understanding how I can lead as an introvert, and constantly asking support from my message itself.
That's beautiful. It's almost like that idea of God having the experience of being Jonita, and God expressing themselves through Jonita, the masculine and feminine deity piece and the divine piece of that yin yang force that comes as a very unique expression through each of us.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was getting, one of the messages that I was getting, is that all my suffering and whatever pain I was going through, or whatever judgment I was going through, was because I was or whatever wounding I was holding on to, because it was happening because I had not allowed love into that space. And we spoke about, we rejecting love. We're not opening to love. When there is a situation that is not favorable to us, and where we are judging ourselves, or where we are really hurting, that's a spot where we have not really allowed love to seep in. Somehow, somewhere, we have rejected the real pure impulse of life itself, which is love. And just sitting with that also helps me to understand this whole idea of how to lead. Can I allow love here, or am I going to just judge myself throughout the entire situation and make it even worse and suffer?
Yes, that inner critic, that inner judge, it wants to keep love away for this worthiness piece that we all struggle with. Not feeling that we can send love to those places because maybe we've hurt someone, or maybe we've hurt ourselves, and that's part of that tension, right? It's like, love the things that you rejected in yourself, love that you rejected yourself, love that you rejected or hurt someone else. And that interplay can be so painful. How do you send love? So do you do it visually? I like to do just picture that I'm sending like golden light, or something from my heart is pouring into that place. How do you work with that?
So the last couple of years has been really going into forgiveness, because I realized that I have held a lot of woundedness against myself. Like, I haven't forgiven myself for a lot of things, a lot of really small things, which did not make sense to many people, but I am holding on to those, and I haven't sent love there. And for me, the practice was, so I do this Ayurvedic practice called Abhyanga, which is with a warm oil. So like really, and I do it once a week. I think, once a week is fair enough to say, where I spend time with like what is present, what is really burdening my heart, and where can I forgive, and how can I sensualize this entire process. So Abhyanga is an Ayurvedic process of taking warm oil and massaging your heart.
Oh, I love
And,
that.
and I, of course, mix some essential oils depending on the mood, and just sending love. And sometimes I feel like just doing this physical act helps me. Having this dedicated space helps me to activate that heart's love capacity. Other days, as you said, like we cannot be doing abhyanga all the time and be greasy walking around.
Yeah.
but but other days, I simply hold myself and breathe. Like, I really like to hold my bells of love, and this is for me, my bells of love are the extension of my heart, the physical representation of my femininity, my breasts. I hold them, and I just breathe. I just breathe.
There also is this point that you have to break through, where you have the awareness that you're in a fear response, or that something's been triggered inside of you where you feel unlovable or unworthy. But you have to bridge to the action of wanting to, or I don't want to say forcing yourself, but really compelling yourself to do these practices, because the natural response is apathy or shutting down. So, we call that it's like a synapse that you have to jump, from one state to the other to create that state change. There's a choice factor. And I have found that a lot of times the women that I work with, because they are in deep self-abnegation or beating themselves up, they don't feel that they deserve to do something like putting warm, on the unconscious level, that they don't deserve to do something like taking the steps to warm up oil, putting essential oils in it, and rubbing it on their heart. they're stuck in that cycle of just, why would I'm not even worthy to take care of myself. I'm not even worthy to do that. When you
Mm.
have the awareness that that's what's going on, what's your advice there?
Yeah, I have several clients saying the same thing, and even when they do that, they don't feel anything. That's what they say. And I've heard from many saying that, yeah, I did that, but that was it, and it didn't work well, or yeah, it was good for 5 minutes, but I still feel the same. And I feel that what we are doing is we are trying to process things in the body using the mind, and
Mm,
that's where the disconnect is, um, because we don't know how to stop our mind from interfering firstly. So it becomes an active process, to give an activity to the mind itself. And I keep saying that, okay, tell your mind to allow 5 minutes, or tell your mind to remind yourself that if I go into the mind, then just breathe. And one of the things we in this path is so important for us women who are called to lead our lives in certain ways, is the ability to sit in active discomfort,
mm,
to really be able to hold this tension, as you were saying,
mm,
like, holding the tension. And this is the way right now. We have softened, but we have not tapped into this powerful reserve that we have, which is so resilient. Especially as women, we are emotionally extremely resilient. Somehow we have believed that we are broken, and we do not have the capacity to hold that tension, and
mhm.
and we want to do everything by ourselves, like through our minds. And just becoming aware of these perspectives and changing certain perspectives in the mind first, and then going into the body, really, really helps.
So once you have that awareness and you can step back and see that this is your pattern, that, oh, here I go. I feel powerless. Here comes this tension point. I don't know if I can hold it. I don't, there's overwhelm that ensues. Um, I found that awakening through the sensory portals. So looking at something to create a state change that's different, smelling something like an oil or a flower, or getting outside and feeling the wind and the sun on your face, and these kinds of things. Um, so my little catchphrase that I first used with myself when I was experiencing all of like the real season of the dark night was, um, I value myself enough to do what it takes right now to feel differently. But I also recognize I need to feel this. I need to feel this pain or sorrow or shame or guilt or whatever, or grief. I need to feel these feelings fully. And in order for me to have the power to feel these feelings fully, to be in this cave, I need to take my accoutrements with me in terms of like, I've got to step outside. I've got to put time out on my mind, like you're saying. It took me months to even feel like, because I really felt there was something wrong with me. And this is another thing we can talk about, is that a lot of times when you are in that active discomfort and you're holding the tension, you think, I don't want to use this whole euphemism, I'm going crazy, but it really does feel destabilizing. It feels mentally disruptive, psychologically destabilizing to be in that place. And this is where the chaos that we hear a lot about, the dark feminine, the chaos, the messiness, the place in the middle that doesn't look so pretty, doesn't have this stoicism to it. It's just, here we go. Let's feel it. And what can I do to support my physical body while I'm feeling this, so that I have some measure of safety?
Mhm.
For me, that's where the senses come in.
Yeah, it's so important, because for us women, through senses, we can really activate a lot of feelings, and even the codings in our bodies, huge remembrance. So it does require practice. That's what you also said, that yes, it does require practice. Today me and you are sitting and talking about this because we just didn't start doing it. It does require practice,
Right.
and it does require dedication. And I like to switch the word discipline with devotion. It
Mm,
does require devotion to our own self. Like, how much am I really committed to to feeling all of it. It does require that inner marriage, inner commitment with our own selves first. It has to, again, it comes from the mind, but the decision has to be made first. And feminine is not only just beauty, it's chaotic, it's messy. So the whole idea that, you know, we cannot go into feeling messy is counterproductive to the feminine, because, you know, when we do the dance, the dark feminine, in our messiness and in our lying in a pool of our tears, those are the moments where we hit that sweet spot where this huge burst of creativity opens up. It has happened several times for me, for the women that I have noticed. It is just there, but we cannot meet it always through our beauty. Sometimes we meet it through our messiness. So the whole idea that we have to, you know, do good things to activate something deeper inside of us is an illusion, because the feminine is way beyond that. It has no definition, and the senses really help us feel all of that. Our senses really align our bodies to those feelings of wanting to feel things.
Yes. And I've always said the senses are your feel-good portals, but sometimes they activate this pain or this trauma or the shadow aspect that we've been unwilling to feel. And so we judge it. Oh, I feel messy right now. I feel chaotic. I feel this. I feel overwhelmed. And those, like you said, those are the points where we decide, a decision must be made, that you are worth it, that devotion to self is paramount. And I know that you and I are aligned on this one, that you are in devotion to yourself, you are in devotion to the divine. They're the same, it's the same thing, because you are a part of the divine. So as you serve self through these measures of, you know, sitting with tension and holding it and feeling everything and doing the work, when you do that, you are actually, that's your greatest service on the planet. It isn't, you know, you and I could go out and, like, you know, speak to large groups of people and have these programs and work with these women, but until, you know, I don't see any higher work than what we're talking about here. Finding the light within, finding the disciple is the root word of discipline. I'm with you. It's all about devotion. It's all about a disciple into the divine that lives in you. It's the common denominator for you of what is taking you to the next place. It's the common denominator that connects us all. So yeah, anything to share about that, just the devotion to self and why that's so much a part of serving humanity and God?
Yeah, we see devotion as something really sacred, done to goddesses and, you know, things that are sacred. We don't bring it to our own selves, and that's something that we women have to, you know, remember, that, you know, we are the sacred. We are sacred beings. Through us, we bring the sacred, and therefore it begins through us. And yes, we may feel like crap, and we may feel all of the things not good enough, and it happens to me regularly. I'm sure you also go through a lot of the hard, dense feelings. It is important that we don't make our identity to that. Those feelings come and go, but our true nature is sacred, and the dense emotions come and go. So we can really become witness of this craziness called womanhood, because we experience such a big wide range of emotions in given 10 minutes. And we've got to stop attaching our identities to the emotions that come and go, and rather reclaim the devotion that is the sacred inside of us.
So beautiful. So yeah, accepting, you know, that I came here to feel it all, you know, all of it. And when I really drop in and when I'm really present, I feel a lot of sorrow for what's happening collectively. You know, I can really touch that and feel the grief of what's happening with humanity, and what's, let's just say, even happening with women. It's this portal that you pass through to get into the mystery. It's it's difficult. It's an initiation, and everything we're talking about is initiation to the sacred, to touch the sacred in you, not outward devotion. You know, Christ said the kingdom of heaven is within. There's so many religions that teach this, and spiritual communities, and thought leaders and way showers and shamans and healers that are talking about the same thing, is that your highest work is to come back to the sacred within and to touch that and to source from it. That is what's fueling or will fuel your purpose, and it will also fuel how you feel day to day. But it's not
Yeah.
always about feeling good.
Yeah.
When you touch the
Yeah.
sacred, it's not always sunshine and roses and yeah.
Yeah. Can we feel shit and feel the sacred? Again, that's the duality
Yes.
piece. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
And
we?
mother, she cleans it. She metaphorically, the mother goddess is changing shit. She's changing diapers. Like, that's what the mother does. She cleans up vomit in the middle of the night. You know, that is part of it. It's, you know, it's just all of it. She
Mhm.
holds all of it.
Yeah.
And we
And
do too.
we can really sensualize our sadness. We have this gift, and we women know our patterns, like what makes us sad and what circumstances makes us sad. So instead of like resisting or starting to think positive or attaching our identity, how about just creating a sensual sadness ritual, and just be with it, because eventually those emotions go. And when we allow ourselves to feel rather than think the feelings, when we think the feelings, we make up stories, and stories and
Yeah.
stories just goes out of hand.
Yeah, it lasts. It's a loop. It's actually such a loop that you can get into when you try to create story around these feelings. These feelings that are in you are big, and they're not new. You didn't reinvent the wheel. You're not the first person to feel these feelings. We are all experiencing them. So I think the biggest part of that work is what you just named, is to have some kind of practice or ritual or ceremony around the big feelings like sadness or grief or depression or whatever. It's like, okay, here it comes. It's not me. I'm just experiencing it. It's just
And
moving through me.
it's the wave. Sometimes we are in the up tide, and sometimes we're
Mhm.
in the low tide, and that's the cycle. It's never going to be always the low or always the high. That's feminine.
Yeah,
Cyclic.
it's what we signed up for. So we might as well ride the waves, right? Well, we could keep talking about this, and I know there's so much to explore here. I know our last episode was on the dark feminine, and I think you and I have even moved deeper into this work, even obviously since we last talked, and we're starting to see patterns in, and not only what's happening globally, but what's happening in individuals as these changes are coming. We are being called to ride these waves. We're being called to move into a new way of being, and it requires that we go within. So, what is the work that you offer? I know you have places online where people can find you. I'm part of your Facebook group, and I love that you speak so openly about sensuality and coming into the body. I know that you have a lot of tantric training, and I think it's the Taoist, you call it the ancient feminine Taoist tantric somatic arts, which is such a beautiful mouthful right there. But do you want to direct our listeners to where they can find you?
Mm. Yeah. So most of my work is happening on Facebook. So you can find me through my name, Jonita D'souza, or Exploring Femininity. And yeah, that's what I can say. I'm restarting my Insta page, so I wouldn't recommend that for now. So, but I am mostly available on my website, jonitadesouza.com, and on Facebook.
Great. I love that. Just the phrase exploring femininity. That's your work. That's what we've been talking about today. There's so many facets to our being, to us as feminine beings. And as we attach to these practices that allow us to hold it all, the chaos, the mess, the beauty, the pain, the heartbreak, the bliss, it can be really, really helpful to be in community with other women who are in that work. So thank you for what you do. It's been an amazing
Yes.
connection with you, just feeling into your work and what you're about. I totally honor your work.
Likewise, sister, likewise. I totally love what you do with the oils and even the women's work. It's amazing what you've created. And I always enjoy reading your emails as well. And I am so happy to be, in conversation with women like you who resonate. We are like kindred spirits, and there are so many of us around. And yes, community is so important. We somehow somewhere like validating what we are going through, and finding communities where we find resonance and validation through that is so important.
We are all finding each other, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
We are.
it's time. Thank you so much for this today, Jonita.
My pleasure.